Hey everybody, it's Nicole. I'm here today with the Vicky Booten design team, and I'm going to create a layout with tons of the papers from the new Storyteller collection. I'm going to start my project here with this really simple plain grid style paper, and I have some black art crayon that I'm watering down here with some water, and I just want to create a fine little mist of droplets onto my background. I'm going to let that sit just for a minute, and then I'm going to roll over that with my paper towel just to kind of damp up any excess. I don't want it to be really, really wet, so I don't want any warping. But I just want to be able to create that really subtle drop-like texture in the back of all my papers. So I'm going to go through, I know I'm going to cut some letters out of that paper. There's a couple of these cut apart cards I think I'm going to use. I'm going to cut down two of them here. I really like that journaling card, and I like this one with the butterfly. So I'm going to cut those two and set those aside. And then I'm going to cut some strips out of each of these papers. So I'm going to cut an 1.5 inch strip from each of the ones that I want to use. I want to take a good variety of the different colors here. So I think I'm going to go with almost every single pattern in the collection. And I'm really using the B sides for this. I'm not using the A sides that has more of the busier patterns. So I'm using the back sides of all of them. And each of them has a nice different texture on the actual pattern. So I think this will give me a great look later on when I go and piece everything kind of back together. So 1.5 strips from each of these. You could definitely use a lesser quantity of colors, but I really wanted that variety. I'm just going to go ahead and just sort these out by color grouping and put them in Roy G. Biv as I have here. And then I've decided I want to kind of trim each strip down into 3-inch so I get some rectangles out of this. So I'm going to cut each of these strips down to 3 different rectangles that are 4 that are 3 inches in length. And I'm just going to make a big pile of those again so I have some rectangles. And I'm going to cut these down again further later. I think I'm going to end up cutting down the 3-inch strips into 1.5 inch squares, but I'll get to that a little bit later. And I really like working with smaller pieces of paper like this and kind of building my own pattern. It allows me to bring in a lot of different papers into a project and not have to worry about having a full sheet. So if I only have a little scrap of something left over, I can go ahead and recreate and make an entire background with some little pieces like this. All right, so these are my last couple strips. So I have the purples done. And now I'm going to go ahead and just kind of place them on my page. I really wanted this kind of, I had an idea in my head about a staggered kind of look. Again, I'm just going to sort these out by color just so I can kind of grab the colors that I need. Not worrying too much about the patterns just now. And now this is where I've decided to cut some of them down into 1.5 inch squares. So I think I'm going to do 2 of each pattern into the squares just so I have a variety of the longer and then the shorter pieces, just so I can kind of stagger that through my project. I don't think I needed quite all of them, but in the end, I end up making 2 projects with the paper that I've cut down just from this one video alone. So I've decided to kind of go kind of on a horizontal feel versus vertical as I had intended to in the beginning. And I'm just really laying these down. I'm not measuring anything. I'm just leaving a little bit of a gap, probably about 1/8 of an inch in between each paper. And then I'm going to make the same kind of line to the right there with more of the rectangles. So I'm going to just measure this up and down a little bit so I have a gap above the top piece. And I'm just adding in more papers. I'm making sure that I don't have 2 that are kind of the same, too close together, and adding that in. And I thought about doing some pop-ups with the squares. I thought would look really cool on some of the overlap, just taking some foam adhesive and popping them up. But I kind of decided against that. I thought I'm going to go ahead and just stick these down here with a little bit of adhesive. I am going to use a ruler just to kind of keep that visual line of the rectangles vertically up and down, so that's even. I don't want to have anything going in and out too much, but again, not measuring in between the rectangles at all. I'm really just eyeballing that to make sure I kind of get them put into place where I want them. So once I have these all in place, I've decided I'm going to go ahead and add some stitching. Again, I kind of really toyed with the idea of having some squares, and I'm kind of placing them over top of some of those overlaps of the pieces. And it's kind of looking okay. I thought about it, and then I realized that wasn't really working for me. The idea I had in my head, it wasn't going to work. But So I decided to think on it a bit, and that's where I'm going to do some of the stitching. So I'm going to do just some rows across each of the different strips. Some of them will be double rows, some of them will be single rows. And I'll even add a little bit of zigzag stitching. You can see here I have all my rows stitched down. And then I decided that I think the squares are actually too big. So I just tore them in half, and I'm adding those torn pieces along some of the strips. So I'm just going ahead and in no sort of manner matching up anything. I'm using the A and the B sides of these papers to kind of add those torn edges down. I like the torn edge because you get that little pop of white from the paper that's in the core of the paper. And I think that's what I needed before. When it was just the squares, there was some textural piece missing. So I think the tearing of the strip kind of helped me get that texture that I wanted. So I am going to add a strip to almost every single piece of the rectangles here. And I'm just alternating between them. So I'm making sure I don't have kind of too much of the same. I don't want to have two rectangles with two torn strips that are the same. I want them to all be a little bit different. So I'm going to stick those down, and then I'm going to go ahead and add more stitching across the top of those little pieces. Realistically, I probably should have done this first and then done my stitching, but that's okay. So I'm going to add those down with just the tiniest amount of foam tape runner to keep them in place. Really just for the stitching. I do like a dot runner for this so that your sewing machine doesn't get too gummed up. If you use a lot of adhesive, you'll really make a mess of your sewing machine needle. So really quickly, I'm just going to zip through again and just kind of go over those areas that I'd already stitched down. Okay, so I'm going to save those extra squares, and there's a few extra rectangles left, and I'm going to use them in a video for next week. So don't ever throw anything like that away because that paper's already cut for next time. I have a couple 3x4 photos, and I thought it would just be good to mat those on a plain black cardstock just to kind of add a little bit of neutral to this page because there is already a lot of color. So I'm going to go ahead and just mat those really quickly. This is just a cheap plain cardstock that I have in my stash. And then I'm going to add some foam tape behind each of the photos just to give those a little bit of pop. I like these big foam tape rolls for things like this so that it comes off really easy and I don't have to worry about the tiny little backing of the foam adhesive. Alright, so I decided that you couldn't see a lot of my black droplets from before, so I'm going to go ahead and just repeat that same process because I still want those little drips kind of showing in the background. And again, let it set for a second and roll it over. And then I thought I would do the same thing with some of the gold glaze from Vicky's collection. You don't need a lot for this. I actually have way too much as it is, and I'm just going to water it down slightly and make those same droplets with the gold. That's just going to bring in some of those yellow tones that are in the paper. And then let that sit and dab that off as well so your surface is dry. Alright, I'm going to add my photos now. I'm going to add these on a slight angle because all of the papers are so straight. It'll really just make the photos pop a little bit more. And I'm going to stick those kind of one side on either side of the page. Now I'm going to cut this large butterfly out of the 4x6 or 6x4 journaling card really quickly. This is a nice design. I love all the different colors that are in there, and that's going to help us really, bring all the paper in this collection out as like a, cohesive element, I guess. So I'm going to just move this butterfly around, cut it out, and then I'm going to use that to kind of join things together on my project. So I'm going to put that here in the middle of my page. I'm going to grab a glue dot just to stick that down, and then just kind of use that to overlap between both of those photos. So it kind of brings it all together. And I will add a tiny bit of foam tape behind each of the wings of the butterfly just to keep that a little bit dimensional. Now this, I thought about again, I can't give up on those squares. So I thought about using some squares, but I'm not going to. I am going to save them for my project for next week. And then now I really want to start getting my title down. There's a lot of different options in Storyteller to use as a title. I love that newspaper chipboard, but I really decided to go ahead and cut some words out of this paper from the collection. So this is a bit finicky work, but there's some great words, and I decided just to cut them out. And I'm going to take some foam adhesive and put that on the back of them and then kind of create my own title. Although there's already pre-made words in the paper that you could cut, which is what I've done here, you can also kind of make your own just by cutting apart each of the separate letters individually. I kind of like this green color. It really goes with the teal that's in the paper. It is almost like a really good neutral. So I thought, it's a little bit of work, but I think it's totally worth it to have to those letters kind of popped up here. So I'm just going to write document your story. And again, just popping it up with a little bit of foam adhesive. And then I'm going to go back in and create the word own, because that wasn't one of the words that was already pre-done for me. So really quickly cutting these out. And just think of how many words are on that paper. So buying a paper like that is like $1.50. You get a whole lot more titles than you do in one sticker sheet. Just saying. So just going to make some quick work and cut those last 3 letters out, and then I'll fill them in there underneath the Word document on the right side. And I'm just going to I'm using some really skinny foam tape, iAdhesive by 3L. It's a really good one because you can cut it, it's strips, and you can cut it down to a smaller size if you want. I like it, it's perfect for letters like this. Okay, so now I need to kind of finish off and see what other embellishments I want to add. I don't want to add a ton because I already have a lot going on with the paper. I thought about cutting some more butterflies from one of the other pattern papers, but decided against it. I really just wanted that one really big butterfly in the middle of the page. And then I thought some of these chipboard strips would be really good. So I'm going to add a few here just around my photo. I love these tickets. I thought about using 2 and stuck with just 1 instead. I'm going to add a little staple to one of the chipboard flags and add that to my photo. And then I liked these kind of roughed up hearts, these gold hearts that are in the collection. So I'm going to use that on some of those little almost like flag strips that we had sewn down later. And then what else? Is there any stickers I decided to use? I think I'm going to use this one just to add as like a photo layer on that top right photo. And I played around with some of the others, but I really don't want to add too much because I do have a lot going on with the fussy cut letters and that big butterfly already. So I think just a few of these puffy dots will be it for me to finish things off, just to kind of fill in those empty gaps and almost just overlap some of those little papers on the page. And let's do a couple close-ups now so you can see that detail up close. You can see those cute little drips in behind on the background. And I really love the title, how that was just so easy to add. And really you can create your own title your own way. And I love that big butterfly. Look at all the different colors and patterns that are in there. And that's it for me this week. Don't forget to save your squares left over from this project because we will use them again next week. Bye-bye.